Hello, and welcome to another review video. This time around, I'll be looking at the Gung-Ho Alternate Journey collab, which is a reskin of the Gundam collab from JP. This collab has 2 REMs with different lineups, and each role costs a whopping 10 magic stones. Unfortunately, Gung-Ho and I messed up a lot with this rerun as we are still missing most of the first set of the Gundam units. JP has a total of 70 REM units across 3 REMs, but in NA, we only have a total of 52 units across 2 REMs. I was expecting Gung-Ho to give us, at the very least, all of the Gundam 3 REM units, plus the old Gundam 1 units that got new evolutions, just like how it happened during NA's first AJ run. We did get a full Gundam 3 reskin, but out of the 3 Gundam 1 units that got new evos in JP, we only got 1 in NA. Let me quickly go over the 2 missing units. First, Z Gundam is a very unique unit. The base evo is only one of 2 50% gravities. Missing this unit just for that very unique active skill really sucks, but to add insult to injury, their new evo was key in some VNOA teams. That evo was mainly used for farming SN5, but even without that unit, VNOA can still tackle SN6 since we at the very least got Charge Saku, aka Adraglend in NA, who is more essential to VNOA teams. I'm assuming Gung-Ho is aware of that fact, and they got really greedy by making our reskin version a BGM unit and raising its rarity to 8 stars. The latter change doesn't really matter, but by making this unit a BGM, Adraglend is no longer exchangeable for GFEs as it was in JP. Also, the pull rate for this unit is now much lower. The other unit that I expected us to get was Gundam 1's BGM, since this unit got 2 new evos during JP's latest Gundam run. I wasn't particularly excited for the unit, but I am sure that some could find use out of the many forms, particularly their equip. Apart from these major issues with the reskin, there are a few other differences in some of these collab units. These units get an extra monster type added, but I don't think that this is that significant. I mean, this could matter if enemies have damage from these monster types or for whenever we get a devil or gat enhancement badges, but by then, we'll probably have way better units of those types. A somewhat more significant change happened to these 2 units, who now have different attributes. Yu has new evo as a water sub-attribute instead of wood like their Gundam counterpart. But with that unit like this, you would most likely change it to light sub-attribute regardless, so that you can deal more damage. Reena is now Dark Fire Fire instead of Fire Dark Fire like its Gundam counterpart. It does always suck to see a third attribute differ from the main, but honestly, I don't think that this is a bad change for Reena. I'll go into a little more detail later for these units, but for now, let me look at the farmables and other non-REM units. These 4 descended bosses are needed for Sync Awakenings, so make sure to get them and max skill them if you care for these units. The reward marked unit is very unremarkable, and that also goes for the REM version, but free is free, so you might as well get this free unit. The same goes for the event Rainbow Medal units. These are not exciting, but it never hurts to get them. Parks is a decent cleric, though when compared to newer units, they are overshadowed by other clerics with better secondary effects. Still, this unit has a good amount of utility, and hopefully 5 black medals isn't too high of a cost, but if it is, I wouldn't really stress much about this unit. This collab brings in a new type of unit and bundle that we'll be seeing for every REM from now on. You can either purchase Kagerou for 1 million monster points or for $30, but I don't really think that these units are worth their dollar price tag. A lot of you with older accounts might be close to the 10 million MP cap, and those of you with newer accounts will probably struggle to amass MP, but my advice to both type of players is to try to be more strategic about your MP usage. MP units and enhanced badges have been present so far in every collab and seasonal REM in JP ever since their introduction in their last Gundam rerun, so again, do expect this to become a trend going forward. All of the MP units in JP have been pretty decent so far, either as a base or as an equip, and I feel like a lot of players in JP have been tempted to get multiple copies of each MP unit, especially because there's no purchase limit, so it will be very easy to run out of MP even for those with older accounts. These MP units will further enhance collab badges. For example, the usual collab badge gives you plus 15% HP and recovery and a 50% attack boost. But if you also obtain the MP unit, you can enhance that badge so that it gives you a 2.5 attack multiplier instead of just a 50% boost. Do note that only obtaining the MP unit will not give you the enhanced badge. you will still need to obtain the badge unit at some point to get the enhanced version. Okay, back to this specific MP unit. I would get at least one copy of Kagerou, especially if you're assembling any of the full or close to full AJ teams to get the enhanced collab badge. Kagerou can be a useful unit or equip, so even if you don't have those AJ teams, you might still see value in grabbing this unit. The base can be used in a haste system and has even seen some use in ranking dungeons in JP. The equip is also very solid if you don't mind the fire sub-attribute. It can really shine in SN6 themes due to its balanced type awakening. Again, think hard about how many copies of this unit you will realistically use. I feel like 2 copies is a good amount, but there are some SN6B Noah teams out there that use 3 of these units equipped. And now, onto the REM units. First, I'll take a quick look at the AJ1 units. A handful of these would be nice to have, but I would only go into this machine if you have any concrete plans for these units. Honestly, the only unit we're going for here is Kohaku, but let's see which other units stand out and might be worth keeping around. Ancient Grim is a rebuffer and cap breaker, but unfortunately, their effects only last for 1 turn. The only redeemable part about this unit is their equip. We do have various other options that have a levitate, a skill boost, and a haste active skill, but if you don't have a deep box, this is a decent equip to keep around. Hagios is a damage-centric cleric that buffs HP and has a good amount of Ls to help recover assist, but this unit can only use fire orbs to recover assist, so not that many teams will be able to use this unit. Hagios equip is not a bad option for damage dealers and can also help in super altitude dungeons. Again, it might not be a bad idea to keep these units around. Gaze is exchangeable for GFEs and is a 4-unit PvP swipe system. At the time of release, this unit was mainly used for farming old UN2, and not much has changed since. This is a good swipe system for dungeons without a lot of mechanics, since 4 of your team slots are pretty much dedicated to orb generation. I really don't know about exchanging for 4 copies of Gaze, especially since there are other dark PvP units out there like Tokoyami, Noctaria Kitty, and the new AJ unit, Angarat, from the new AJ machine. So if you have some of those other units, you could mix and match orb generators, depending on the dungeon you are farming. Gaze equips are somewhat interesting, especially the leader swap, but these aren't really worth the chase or exchange. Muscari takes the same fodder as Gaze, and he is probably a better choice since he has 2 usable evos. The base could work in a haste system since he has an ever so useful looping shield and roulette active skill. The evo with 3 attribute awakenings is not that useful though, mainly due to its very lackluster active skill. The reincarnation evo is pretty strong and not a bad option to deal with poor shrinks and void and damage absorption shield. As a heads up, this Muscari evo is seeing some use in Rosetta teams, an upcoming Flower Fairy unit. Rosetta is a very strong dark combo leader and can quickly clear the latest endgame dungeon in JP, so maybe get Muscari if you think you'll be pursuing that leader. Also be warned that both this unit and Rosetta take 7-star GFEs as fodder. Muscari's second equip is also one of very few equips out there with levitate and tape awakening. Overall, I wouldn't say that this is a bad exchange, especially if you have GFEs to spare. Danette is an Orbskin unit. AJ has a new water PvP team, but it doesn't really have any space for base Danette since those new units cover both absorptions already. The evo is slightly better as a damage-centric cleric for dark PvP team. Danette's cleric active skill is on a really short cooldown, which is balanced by having new recovery, but that debuff could be used to counter RCB voids or other long-lasting RCB debuff. Depending on the team and dungeon, this 1-turn debuff could still be pretty deadly, especially with the rise of super altitude dungeon. I think the main highlight for this unit is their water equip, as this one goes nicely in Amiel teams due to the water sub-attribute awakening and the 4-turn haste. As nice as this equip is, I really don't think it's worth $20, so I will probably skip this bundle. Pastel is an old BGM unit, but fire PvP teams are not in a good place at the moment. She is still a decent fire leader if you're not tackling the latest endgame content, as the lack of a leader skill RCB buff or higher FUA damage is not ideal. Most teams only run one of these as a helper, so if you ever make a fire team, you could try finding a Pastel friend. I would say that her second equip is the only redeeming part about this unit, if you don't mind the fire sub-attribute awakening. Last time around, this BGM was a questionable buy since we didn't get CZ Gundam, but even if we had gotten that unit this time around, this bundle would still not have that much value. Zombardier is not a bad absorption voider option for light team, though unfortunately, his active skill only lasts for one turn, and at times, you would rather this be a 2-turn void so that you can deal with super assaults. Still, this unit adds a significant amount of bulk with his team HP awakenings and might be worth the trouble of trying to fit him in a team. There's a very specific and fast SN6 F91 team that uses this unit, but thankfully this unit is exchangeable for GFEs, so you can save yourself the trouble of rolling in the first AJ1. The equips have okay awakenings, but the active skills are nothing to write home about, so I would mainly just get a copy if you care about F91 teams. Adraglend is the batch unit. The base and evos could be decent fire subs. You will probably want to get 2 so that you can use the third evo as your orb generators. The first equip is solid since you could condense your cleric and looping shield into one team slot. The second one is one of a handful that have a levitate and bulk awakenings. The main reason why you would want to exchange for Adraglend would be for the AJ badge, but unfortunately, this unit only takes AJ1 units as straight fodder. If you didn't roll in the REM last year, you will not have enough fodder to make this straight since we only get 7 total pre-AJ1 rolls, and he requires 10 as fodder. I usually don't think that the patch bundle is worth it, but if you sometimes spend money in the game, then maybe this bundle is worth a second look so that you can avoid the first REM. I would otherwise wait for all the stamp rolls and see if you can free roll it. If that's not the case, then be ready to pull in AJ1, and this is all just assuming that you even want the badge. Darante is a key unit for some Binoa teams, but that mainly goes for the newest Evo. The base is a damage stick and rebuffer, but this unit doesn't really carry its weight in modern teams. The second Evo has always been a bit weird since its low cooldown leader swap active skill doesn't really have many useful applications. Maybe a 30-turn cap break was impressive last year, but now this is nothing special. Again, the main highlight for this unit is the latest Evo, which serves as a cleric and has the coveted 7-turn haste active skill that helps close the 2 Noah loop. This unit also has the magic number of 4 Ls that can quickly help you recover assist, which is very important for these swipe teams that rely on auto healer effects. If you didn't get this unit last year and have to be Noah's and be Athena to make the team, definitely look into getting this unit via exchange and try to avoid the RAM. Yuha is the other old BGM unit, and she is a pretty decent light L leader. This unit is basically overshadowed by F91 and Themis teams, so I wouldn't chase a Yuha team. One problem with this unit is their orb generation, as it doesn't provide enough orbs for a BDP. Usually Yuha teams do not run a piercer, so you will need to run some other unit to provide more light orbs when needed, either by generating them or by giving you a roulette. A sub with those effects will be sorely needed if enemies decide to flood your board with light, fire, or heal orbs, as Yuha's active skill is unable to override any orbs, and therefore she might not be able to give you an activatable board. At the end of the day, Yuha is still fairly strong, and I guess if you took a year-long break and had a Yuha team, you still have a somewhat meta team. Yuha's first equip is amazing, since it basically gives you 6 effective skill boosts if you can delay enemies. Her second equip is very unique and has seen some play in some ranking dungeons due to its pierce and button effects, not to mention that the Taco awakenings might also matter depending on the dungeon. Yuha's new Evo is basically a damage-centric Aurora, but unlike that Disney cleric, you don't have to transform this unit. That does come at the cost of giving Evo Yuha a 6-turn cooldown, which is a little on the long side for a cleric active skill. Honestly, this isn't that big of a deal, especially in the new light teams where haste units are commonplace and can enable you to be a little more liberal with Yuha's active skill to loop the shield effect, though Aurora's team HPs and Hiloise might be preferable, especially the latter if you're tackling a super altitude dungeon. But if you really want damage and don't need the utility, then Evo Yuha is a really solid choice. Still, I wouldn't chase this unit in the RAM, but if you buy bundles, getting Yuha might not be a bad idea due to her equips and newest Evo. Kohaku is probably the biggest reason why you would try to venture into the first AJ RAM. Even after her very noticeable buffs, she is still one of the better clerics out there since she has insanely high stats and utility. Her equip didn't change much either after the buffs. It only got a power break awakening, but this is still a very solid button option, mainly due to it only having one animation. If you didn't get this unit last year, I would still be very cautious about spending too many stones in the old AJ RAM. since again, a lot of the units in this machine haven't aged that well. Basically, any unit in the first AJ that is still decent or good can be obtained via bundle or exchange. So look into what you can get out of the first AJ machine and then decide if Kohaku is worth the trouble, but definitely play it safe and wait for all of the AJ free rolls. Generally, newer units means better units when it comes to collabs. The AJ2 machine is full of new units, but I really find it hard to see some use for most of the 5 stars in this REM. At the very least, these units can serve as trade fodder for the new A-star units. If you've been active and pulling for the last couple of months, you probably have better units in your monster box. Bull Artillery is a piercer, but these are not in high demand, especially for dark teams. Trapezoid could add some bulk to a team, but that active skill is just bad. Cherubin and DOS can provide some damage or utility, but these units are overall unremarkable. If you have a very underdeveloped box, then maybe their equips could be somewhat useful, at least for the time being. Drossel at the very least does give you useful looping effects, but again, you might have a better unit somewhere. Drossel's equip does have a button active, but the damage is laughable and is very slow. It could theoretically be useful for some ranking dungeon, since at the very least, it does deal true damage, but I wouldn't get my hopes up. Hekus has an Omnivoid active skill, which might be fine for some farming builds. The cooldown though is very high, so it will be hard to justify using this unless your plan is to only use it once per dungeon. Triangle and Gal have 7-turn cooldown haste active skills, which could help you close a haste loop, though the secondary effects that these units bring won't be as useful as other units in this REM. Chappie is pretty unremarkable as a unit, but the equip is interesting since it generates a bunch of nail orbs and breaks a shield, which has come handy in a recent ranking dungeon in JP. NA got a ranking dungeon somewhat recently where this Gung-Ho collab unit was used for his 20 nail orb active skill. But for that specific JP ranking that I mentioned, Chappie's shield break was more preferable and the 15 nail orbs were more than enough for that ranking dungeon. So if you care about rankings, do make sure to keep at least one copy. Aliot is a 6-star unit with a 5-turn cooldown delay active skill. This is rare at the moment as the only other unit, Ordeal Okuninushi, has an active skill with the same cooldown. This unit could be a damage stick due to their high attack multiplier and 40 billion cap rate. Though apart from the cap rate, this is also not much of a viable sub for in-game content. The equip has 7 effective skill boosts, but depending on the dungeon, you might not be able to fully take advantage of the delay effects. Zella Zella is a unit built for an archetype that's basically non-existent at the moment, fire and dark TPAs. The equip does add a decent amount of damage to TPA units, but with that active skill, this wouldn't be one of my first options. It is a true gravity, but 20% is not as high as some of the other farmable options out there that can deal up to 35%. Angarat is a dark PvP unit that could replace a copy of Gaze in a Gaze system. This unit's active skill is on the same cooldown, but tackles damage absorption shields instead of combo shields. With this unit, you also don't have to worry about transforming them, which might be a positive since you could inherit some long-lasting effect to help farming whatever dungeon. Angarat can also have up to 2 Power Break Awakenings, so she could farm dungeons like Loki and Enigma, though I'm a little bit skeptical about that since 4-unit systems do not have a lot of flexibility. The equip gives you a fixed board, but this one is not particularly exciting, and shield effects are usually not needed in ranking dungeons and will just give you one more animation and slow you down. Isel is a rebuffer with a decent attack multiplier and can bring some utility with her possible 4L, but the active skill is basically useless in newer dungeons. Her equip is actually pretty decent for SN6 for the bulk and balance type awakenings. The shield active skill could also be easily overcharged to tank Gokrex's Super Assault Hit and other similar ones that have been present in the newest dungeons. Also, the equip's Power Break Awakening is an added bonus since this mechanic is becoming more and more commonplace. Speaking of Power Break Awakenings, Lulu is the only unit with 3 Power Break Awakenings so far. She could be a decent PB stick for dungeons like Loki and Enigma. Their active skill might not be that useful for endgame content, but in dungeons like Tomoe's, where her breakable part has a lot more HP, the 20% gravity could be a decent time saver. Voltaire and Aquarius make up a water and light PvP team, as they have active skills that synergize really well, but the whole team never really caught on in JP. Aquarius' pre-transformation active skill enables Altair to transform. Unfortunately, the team overall is pretty slow. More often than not, This team will only be running 2 Altairs as the only source of orb generation, so half the time you'll have to 1C to stall. Taking a hit here and there is easy since Altair is a pure HP leader that gives you a looping auto heal effect, but a pure HP leader is also very susceptible to gravity attacks. Aquarius helps mitigate this issue with their shield active skill, but anything greater than a 400% gravity will still kill you. Gung-Ho has been scaling down a little bit on gravity percentages, but you still need to know when the gravity attack will come so that you can prepare. As long as you know the dungeon, this team shouldn't have too much of an issue. The only thing that will suffer will be your clear time. Do be warned that some older dungeons, like Even You and Rush, have big gravity attacks, so if you do assemble this team, just know that you might not be able to tackle a good chunk of content. Aquarius is exchangeable, but again, I wouldn't bother, especially because outside Altair teams, only handling 1 absorption is often not ideal. Altair is an upskin unit, and while I do like this unit's equips, mainly the first one, I would easily pass on the bundle. Izayoi and Lily are one of the slightly better units to close haste loops, at least much better than the other 5-star AJ2 units. Izayoi could deal some damage in light haste teams, but since you will not be going out of your way to match TPAs, especially in Sakamata teams, Izayoi won't be pulling their weight damage-wise. Since they don't offer anything and are even bindable, you might as well go with Lily since at the very least, she can give you a decent cap break. This unit is water main attribute and has a lot of BDP awakenings, so she won't be doing any damage. But this is basically the next best thing, at least at the moment, to a copy of Pauleu in a Themis or a Sakamata team. Lily could deal some damage in Altair teams, and she could fit in nicely since those teams also need a cap breaker, but since I'm not a fan of those teams, I wouldn't place too much value in Lily, especially if you can manage to get 1 or 2 Pauleus. Natier is an exchangeable 8-star and is the only unit with the looping HP buff and roulette active skill, though the HP buff is very minimal. It'll be pretty hard to justify including this unit in a team, as when it comes to looping roulettes, you usually prefer to have a time buff to complement it. The equips are also a bit lackluster, but could always have some applications. For example, the second equip could be used to almost completely bypass Lucifer's test in UN6 and its old version. 8 combos for 8 turns feels like overkill, but again, it could be useful somewhere. Since this unit and Sakamata have a lot of photo overlap, I would first make sure that you are comfortable exchanging for Natier. Mark is an exchangeable 8-star unit and can be a decent leader for fire and water combo teams, but this archetype is basically non-existent at the moment. This orb changer is on a 4-turn cooldown, so to get consistent orb generation, you either have to include 4 copies of this unit or a 2-turn orb changer to close the loop. Maybe someone like Joe could work out, but honestly there's nothing at the moment, or for the next 2 months. You could make a Mark system with only 2 copies if you include 4 haste units in your team. He has a really solid leader skill, but since the archetype doesn't have much support at the moment, I can't really recommend exchanging for this unit in the hopes that Gung-Ho will release any future support. By that point, they will probably just release a much better version of Mark. Mark's equips do add solid bulk, but honestly these are not special and are not worth the effective cost of 70 stones. Reena is an Omnivoider on essentially a 4-turn cooldown. This is a very decent sub for any team to deal with those 3 very common mechanics. Since we are missing Kagerou from JJK, this unit might be one of the better units out there to replace him. Kagerou hasn't been that relevant in JP, but as of late, he has been showing up in Rosetta teams. This is a brown new flower fairy and is a really strong dark combo leader. Like I mentioned before, Gung-Ho swapped these units' attributes for our reskin version, and I do think that was a net win, since at least with a dark main attribute, Reena will be able to deal a bit more meaningful damage in dark teams. It sucks that Gung-Ho did not make its third attribute match the main though. This unit's equip is the first one in NA to have a Levitate and Dark sub-attribute awakening, since we again missed out on JJK. I would definitely try to keep 1 or 2 copies of this unit since it might be useful in Rosetta teams and also on the off chance that we get the Haikyuu collab. Thundarda is an exchangeable 7-star that has 2 very useful forms. The base is the only unit with an 8-turn haste active skill, though this can only be used once per dungeon. Therefore, after using the active, this unit will only serve as a damage stick since it's very unlikely that you'll be able to overcharge this unit before the dungeon is over. I think this unit can go in various farming teams due to the haste, but it could also go in other very weird and niche teams. For example, you could use this unit to rehaste Academy Valerias in those gimmicky refresh teams. Evo Thundarda is the usual choice for attribute and damage absorption role in Sakamata teams. The active skill cooldown is a bit high at 7 turns for a 2-turn lasting effect. With recent power creep, similar active skills have been getting closer to a 5-turn cooldown. But since Sakamata teams usually run at least 2 Pauleus, Evo Thundarda's active skill cooldown effectively becomes 5 turns after you take the 2 Pauleus charges into consideration. The HP buff from Thundarda's active skill is also really great for modern dungeons since these like to have really huge hits. These equips are somewhat okay, but not unique enough to warrant exchanging for. If you plan to make a Sakamata team, do grab 1 copy of this unit for the Evo. And if you think you have uses for the 8-turn haste, you could grab a few more copies. But honestly, I would probably only grab 2 or 3 at the most. Sakamata is an amazing light pro leader that is very easy to play with and easy to obtain if you are rolling a lot in this collab. 2 of this unit can be systemed to loop their orb generation, time and attack buffs, and Pierce effect. Some Themis teams only need 1 copy since those traditionally have 4 haste units, which will in turn effectively bring down Sakamata's cooldown to 1 turn. In a Sakamata team, it's very easy to reach 10C with a single light row and hard combo, and the team also has 16 million FUA, which is just enough to deal with problematic super resolves in new dungeons like SN6. Both of the equips are decent for light teams, but their active skill might not be all that great on the first floor of a dungeon. The first one will enable non-balanced damage dealers, like Bombardier for example, to be able to receive a low cap break, or to simply receive the HP buff from being used in SN6. The second equip probably has fewer applications, but could still be very nice on a Lyro team. If you plan to make a Sakamata team, I would say that you ideally want to get at least 2 copies, one to lead and another one to self-pair. Even if you have a reliable friend or alt that can put up an ideal Sakamata, I still find value in the first equip, so I still think that 2 is the magic number. For those that chose Themis and want to be a little more frugal, you only need 1 Sakamata. Before making any exchanges, it's very important for Sakamata teams to at least have 1 Pauleu, since that is the ideal cap breaker. Adraglend is a Gundam 1 unit that is being included in the AJ2 REM. It is also a great source of controversy. This is supposed to be a reskin version of Charge Zaku, who in JP is originally a 7-star exchangeable unit that takes GFEs as fodder, and is also a key unit in B-Noah teams. Gung-Ho got very greedy and turned this unit into a BGM, meaning that their pull rate is now 1% and it cannot be exchanged for. The first 2 forms and the equips are largely unremarkable. The main highlight is their last Evo, which helps enable teams that only need 2 B-Noahs to loop their orb generation. Adraglend also adds a lot of bulk since they effectively give you a looping shield in those haste teams. The cap break effect might seem useless since B Athena gives you the same effect, and these active skills are usually used back to back, so this just seems redundant. But at the present time, this unit is a really good leader than any other unit out there since you can activate it with a simple swipe of a B-Noah board. Obviously, since this is now a BGM, it'll be very hard to pull, so I wouldn't be surprised that people that don't have any interest in the rest of the collab will just buy the bundle and bounce. Though I assume that a significant number of people feel deeply betrayed, and rightfully so, by Gung-Ho's scummy move, but still want to get this unit via stones since they already spent a lot of resources getting B-Noah and B-Athena. Just remember that, like always, chasing this 1% unit will require a lot of stones and a lot of luck, so do go into this machine with realistic expectations. Lumielle is the other AJ2 BGM unit. The base form can be systemed with 2 copies, but the more popular orb generation option for light teams is Sakamata, since that unit also creates heal orbs. Lumielle does give you a roulette that can allow you to fish out heal orbs, but that's a very slow way of healing. In general, light AJ teams like Sakamata's can't easily stack Power Break Awakening, so if your goal is parse farming, then obviously running this unit as an orb generator is much more preferable since this unit can have up to 2 Power Break Awakening. Evo Lumielle is the first unit to have a 100% gravity attack, which might not have that many applications due to the 99-turn cooldown. That is unless you have a lot of skill charges in your team or you're in a really long dungeon. This unit was actually used in the fastest MD title team, but Evo Lumielle was barely up towards the end of that 20-floor dungeon. I am very skeptical about practical applications for this Evo, but I don't expect Gung-Ho to release another 100% gravity anytime soon, so this alone might be a reason for some to chase after this unit. I do think that the equips will have more applications than the base and the Evo. The first one has a great amount of utility and some damage. As an example, this is a great option to put on Hikari, as the heal OE and 7C Awakenings will allow her to heal more in super altitude dungeons and even be able to deal meaningful damage in some Sakamata teams. That is, as long as you match an L somewhere. The active skill on the first equip isn't too useful, but it can be somewhat easily overcharged to possibly cut down on having a dedicated cleric on your team. The second equip is great in general for any light unit. Since both equips at balanced type, these two are great in most SN teams if you don't mind the light sub attribute on the second one. This BGM bundle definitely has a lot of value for the equips, and also for the very unique active skill on the Evo. As I've said before, Pauleu is amazing haste unit for light teams. This is a key sub in Sakamata and Themis teams for its balanced type cap break effect. In a haste team, you only need one unit to loop the cap break effect, but those teams usually run 2 Pauleus, since those teams can afford the team slot and can greatly benefit from another 30 billion damage stick. Pauleu's board change is very nice, but since it's gonna be essentially on a fortune cooldown, it's not gonna be reliable enough to serve as an orb generator. Pauleu's leader skill is also workable, since it provides a decent amount of FUA and bonus combos. These numbers could be a little bit higher, which is why Sakamata and Themis are usually the leaders. Early on in JP, this unit was used alongside Themis, and people were really hyped about the pairing. But this quickly faded out of favor since Sakamata teams are much easier to pilot and are just as strong. With proper subs, a Sakamata team can deal up to 150 billion damage per turn. Pauleu's equip is the only one that leader swaps and also has a 10C Awakening, though leader swapping isn't that popular at the moment. I would say that you'll be fine with 1 or 2 copies of Pauleu to use for the base form. 2 copies is the ideal number in the teams that I mentioned, but if you're not that lucky, you could still build decent teams with only 1 Pauleu. That single Pauleu will be very crucial to your teams due to the cap break effect. So before trading for Sakamata or exchanging for that Themis, try to grab at least 1 of this unit. The pull rate is not that low, but the chase can get very pricey very fast, since this is a 10 Magic Stone RAM. The strongest monolight teams at the moment are enabled by Pauleu. The recently released leader Themis and Sakamata are in desperate need of a cap breaker, so if you have any interest in those teams, you should go for this unit. Chasing mid rarities can cost you a pretty penny. Even after doing something like 20 rolls, there's still an almost 50% chance of not getting a single Pauleu. Therefore, you must feel comfortable by throwing something like 200 to 300 stones into the second realm just to test the waters. See how you do, and then maybe decide if you need to go for more. Sakamata and Thundarda are also key units in those light teams, but these can thankfully be exchanged for, so get them if you need them. Adraglend and Lumielle are the 2 AJ2 BGMs, and you might want to pick them up for different reasons. Adraglend is a very important unit and leader for being Noah teams, but due to Gonho's greed, this is now a way less accessible unit than its Gundam counterpart. Lumielle is very interesting. The base form could make up a 2-unit system for light combo teams, but this system is not that popular in most Themis and Sakamata teams. Her Evo is the only 100% gravity, but this active skill has a 99 turn cooldown, which will be extremely hard to charge. Her equips are overall great, so even if you don't care much and won't have that much use for the first 2 Evos, this bundle is worth considering due to the equips alone. Do note that all the units that I mentioned so far are only from the AJ2 machine, so if you plan to roll in this event, I would highly suggest you to only focus on the second machine. Units like Kohaku and maybe Yuha are still impactful, but the rest of the AJ1 lineup is not that impressive. If you don't have a Kohaku now and do want to try your luck, I would only wait until after all of the stamp rolls are done. Maybe you could get lucky and avoid rolling in that machine altogether. And if you do like Yuha, maybe just consider the bundle. When it comes to the other units that are exchangeable, I would take a look at Fiadrak, Taranti, Thundarda, and Muscari, as these units do have some uses. Fiadrak for the badge, Taranti for Binoa, Thundarda for some Sakamata teams, and Muscari for Rosetta teams. If you are getting Fiadrak, make sure to also pick up Kagerou so that you can get the badge enhancement. Even without Fiadrak, this is still a very solid unit and equip, and I think that you should get at least 1 unit, maybe even 2 or 3. But remember, every single collab from now on will have a 1 million MP unit, and these have been pretty solid so far, so do try to be a little more careful with your MP usage. As for future events, we might be able to get 2 third-party collabs, IQ and Conan. As always, nothing is written in stone for us in NA, but since the trend now is to roll a lot in a collab to build a meta team, then maybe keep saving your stones if none of these AJ units pique your interest. If we follow JP's schedule, we could see Haikyuu soon after AJ is done. That collab brings a really strong dark combo team that finally stands above Omnimon teams. I think Conan got a lukewarm reception from JP, but they also have a pretty strong team capable of tackling the endgame. Conan himself is the first unit to have an 82% damage reduction leader skill. There should also be a Pad Academy rerun sometime soon, but that seasonal, as it is the case with most of them, isn't really worth that many or any rolls at all. The Flower Fairies have just returned to JP, and they also bring about a really strong dark combo team. Exchanging for Rosetta will be very pricey, so again, another possible reason to skip this rem and keep saving. Seemingly, the only thing from AJ that is usable in the future for other teams is Muscati or Rosetta, so it might not be a bad idea to at the very least pick up that unit. Alright, that does it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and please let me know if I overlooked or underrated anyone from the collab. I already did all my rolls for this collab and did manage to get lucky by getting 2 Pauleus in 30 rolls, though it really hurt to see all of those gold eggs. Anyway, please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Special thanks go out to Breastfeeding Obama, Dark Silencers, Eddie Ryan, Hella Derpy, and Lynx for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.